Hey guys, it's Hannah Hart's Book 6, and this is my March wrap-up. The first book I read is Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. Basically, Stevie Bell is the main character of this novel. She goes to this academy called Ellingham Academy where students can study anything that they're interested in, and she is going to study this murder that happened in the 1930s. And basically, it goes back and forth between the present day timeline and the 1930s timeline, and a murder happens in present day that connects with the murders from the 1930s. So that is about all I can tell you, but this book was ultimately forgettable. The parts that I loved the most were the 1930s portion. I found Stevie to be quite annoying. I just didn't really like the story. The main plot doesn't even happen until about 250 pages into this 300-page book, and the ending does not wrap up anything. There's supposed to be a sequel for this book, but I will not be picking it up. I gave it 3 stars, but I feel like that's actually being generous because I just did not like it. But that is so far an unpopular opinion. Most people have really liked this book, so maybe I'm in the minority. But the next book I read is Dear Mr. Henshaw, and I read this as a part of my middle grade March, but also my Newbery Medal winning challenge that I am challenging myself to complete. Basically, Dear Mr. Henshaw is about this kid named Lee Botts who's in 4th grade. He's recently moved to a new school due to his parents' divorce. His father is a truck driver, and his mother works late nights at a cake shop, basically, and he is just struggling with being at this new school and having his dad be out on the road and his parents being divorced. And he is given an assignment to write a letter to this author, and during the story he writes back and forth to this author, and he writes in his own journal and just all these things that he's going through. It's very heartwarming, and I give it 4 stars. I don't have the cover to show you, but because I read this as an e-copy from my library, and I really enjoyed this book. The next book I read is The Hidden Staircase. This book is the second book in the Nancy Drew mystery series. This book is about Nancy, who is called upon by her friend Helen to investigate this mystery at this mansion at Helen's great-grandmother and great-aunt's house. And the great-grandmother believes that there's a ghost haunting this mansion, and there's a subplot of a man who comes to Nancy's house at the beginning of the novel, warning her to keep watch over her father because her father was the lawyer in a case that did not go well, and something bad will happen to him. These 2 plot lines intertwine at some point during the story, and I found it very interesting. I also read this as a classic for my middle grade March. Gave this 4 stars. I really love these Nancy Drew mysteries. I read this in about 4.5 hours on a car ride home from Texas, so I really enjoyed this, and I'm really glad that I read this. The next book I read is The Giver by Lois Lowry, and is this copy not so beautiful? The Instagram picture that I took with this book actually matched my clothing, and I didn't even mean it to. It actually matches my shirt too. But anyway, I read this book when I was in middle school, and I hated it. I hated the ending. I thought it was so stupid, and I've come to realize that a lot of books that I read when I was younger, I did not have the mental capacity to understand all these things that were happening. This is a dystopian society where there is no color. Everybody in the society, the reason there is no color is because the society has adopted the idea of sameness. This story follows Jonas, who is about to turn 13, and when you're 13, you get your career. You start training to be in this career, and he gets chosen to be the next giver, who is the receiver of memories, and through his receiving of memories from the current giver, he learns a lot about his society and how corrupt his society actually is, and maybe that he doesn't want to live there anymore. I gave it 4 stars, I believe, and yeah, I really liked this, and it was surprising, and I felt like a new woman because I liked this book. The next book I read, because I was currently reading Girl Who Drank the Moon, and I pre-filmed a lot of videos, and I talked trash about that book, but you'll see in a minute that my feelings completely changed. But while reading the first 100 pages of that book, it was boring me to tears, so I picked up this, and this is actually my childhood favorite from middle grade March. It is Walk 2 Moons by Sharon Creech. I read this in 6th grade last summer, and now. So this is my 3rd time rereading this book. I read it pretty fast. I read it on ebook this time because I actually have it on ebook, but here's my physical copy to show you. But basically, I cried during this book. I cry in the same part every single time. I loved this story. I loved Salamanca. I loved Graham and Gramps. They are my true OTP. They are perfect. And I really liked Phoebe. And I know that a lot of critics of this book really hate the character of Phoebe, but through my last reread, I remember finding her annoying as a child, but reading this book, it just makes you feel for Phoebe, and you kind of understand why she is the way she is, because she's very loyal to her family, and she's kind of, she just doesn't understand why things happen to her the way they do in this book. Basically, this book is about Salamanca Tree Hiddle, Sal, who is going on a road trip with her grandparents and going to Lewiston, Idaho to find her mom. On the way to Lewiston, she tells the story about Phoebe Winterbottom and this lunatic, and she kind of finds out that there are parallels between Phoebe's story, the lunatic, and her own story. And it's so beautiful, and if you haven't read a Sharon Creech book, please read this book. It is so good, and I actually need to read more Sharon Creech myself. But that was 5 stars, by the way. Loved it. The next book I read completely threw me for a loop. I got this book on Kindle for about, $1.99, and I actually just picked up this book at the library just to show you because it's so cool. And this book, if you've read A Wrinkle in Time, you may like this book even more. I haven't read it. I actually started reading it this month, and I just don't know if I'm going to finish it. But, I mean, I have to finish it for my Newbery Challenge, but whatever. So, the book is When You Reach Me by Rebecca Stead. I have no idea, but this book is amazing. So this book starts off with Miranda, and her mom is actually training to be on this game show called the $20,000 Pyramid. It's a popular show in the 70s. This book is actually set in the 70s, and she is talking about how she's talking in the past about how she received these letters from this man, and then it's also about this story of her friend Sal doesn't want to talk to her anymore. This event happened with her friend Sal, and she thinks that this is the moment that changed everything that happened in this book. Her favorite book is A Wrinkle in Time, so there actually is the element that I was surprised about is the time travel element in this book, and honestly, it just blew my mind. Like, there were certain parts of this that I had to read over again, and I was like, oh my gosh, I get it. And like, the character who punches Sal is a main character in this story, and there is this man called the Laughing Man, who is a homeless man who lays under the mailbox, and just there's so many random characters. They're like, why are these people significant? And then you figure out, and you're like, what? And basically it gave us 5 stars. It was crazy, and it was a Newbery medal, so it checked off one of my Newbery challenges, and it was crazy. I loved it. During the time that I read Walk 2 Moons, I also read this adult book called Everything I Never Told You by Celeste. And this book is about the Lee family, and the book starts off with the sentence, Lydia is dead. And Lydia is a daughter in this family, and she is basically the center of the Lee universe, and the family kind of just falls apart at the seams. It's basically a character study and talking about family and how communication is key in families, and how parents have different dreams for themselves, and how parents can put their own dreams onto their children, and how that can be detrimental to them. And it was just an amazing story. I originally gave it 5 stars, but her other book, Little Fires Everywhere, I decided that that book was more worthy of 5 stars because this one is, I don't know, I didn't connect to the characters as much. I really liked all the characters, and it was just interesting, and I kept like wanting to yell at the characters and be like, oh my gosh, just talk to each other. Tell each other that you don't, like, this is not what you want for yourself. And so I thought it was a really good book, and I just think that I'll read anything Celeste ever writes. The second to last book I read is The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. This book, it was a roller coaster. I hated the first 100 pages of this, like loathed it, trash talked it in pretty much every video that I pre-filmed last week. And then I read the last 288 pages and I fell completely in love with this book. And I don't know how that happened. I don't know how you can hate a book and then completely like bawl your eyes out at the end of it, but I did. This story is set in the Protectorate, and the Protectorate gives away a baby every year, and they put it in the forest and they leave it for a witch to take it. And they do this because they think that the witch wants the babies, but it turns out the witch doesn't understand why these people do this. But the witch saves the babies and she feeds them starlight. And so they're the star children, and she takes them to the free cities and gives them away to other people. But then one year it is different. A baby is taken into the forest, and the witch accidentally feeds the baby moonlight, which enmagics the baby. And crazy things happen from there. And I just thought the first 100 pages was very slow. The last 200, there was so much going on, and there were all this characters and their stories intertwined, and I just really loved this. I thought it was amazing. 4 stars. Based on the ending of this book, I would have given it like 7 stars, but I had to take down, but obviously you can only rate a book 5 stars on Goodreads, so I took down a star because I didn't like 100 pages of it. But other than that, you need to read this book. It's beautiful. This was the group book for middle grade March, and so we talked about it over at Live Between Words / Books and Jams Instagram page, Instagram story. I don't think that's there anymore, but had a good live discussion about it, and it was awesome. And yeah, I'm on the train of people who love this book. The last book I read is Wishtree by Katherine Applegate. And my goodness, I read this book in a day. I was subbing, and I was in a 4th grade class, and the kids were like doing a lot of like worksheets and stuff. So I was reading this book, and it's about this tree named Red. Red is an oak tree who lives between 2 houses that are rented, and this little girl moves into this house, and people are not happy that she moved there, and there is a hate crime that happens, and the wish tree has been threatened to be cut down. And also in this book, trees can talk, animals can talk, and this tree, the only rule for trees is that they can't speak to people. And basically the tree tells the story, and it's just like, I'm not even explaining it well, but this book was so beautiful. It's about 211 pages, I believe, and I was captivated from the beginning. I never knew a story about a tree could be so beautiful. I loved this book, and I actually need to read The One and Only Ivan by Katherine Applegate, which actually won the Newbery Award. And so, yes, Katherine Applegate can write such a beautiful story. And just also look at these illustrations. Like, just, oh my goodness. This book, there are like leaves on a lot of pages. this was 5 stars. It ended off the month on a great note. And yeah, those were the 10 books that I read in March. Bye guys.